friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here for another Monday this and that vlog. And for those of you who are new, these are weekly videos I do to answer some questions and give you updates and any other information to keep you more current on what's going on around here, since the rest of the videos throughout the week might have been shot anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks prior. So this is the one time of the week I can do this. But if you're watching me on YouTube or follow me on X or Instagram, I also do often have several updates on various things throughout the week that you can see there as well. So let's get to the topics of today, starting off with my newest chicks. So I actually have a video that I shot the other day that's going to be coming out in a few weeks, where I kind of go through this whole past year when it comes to our chickens. Even though we've had chickens for 7 years, we've been doing a lot of new things this year with our chickens. So it's been quite the adventure, and just learning new things has been really cool. So this last batch of chickens, and no, I didn't have any broody hens this year, none of them, because they're either really young and not quite to that stage yet, or they're really old and just none of them went broody. Even my chicken that typically goes broody every season, sometimes 2 or 3 times in a season, nope, they're just all too old. So I'm glad I went ahead and invested in an incubator, even if it is kind of a cheap one. And I won't recommend that one just because some things I've learned. It works fine, but it just has some features that probably would be better to spend a little bit more money, such as a built-in candler, not the cheap little flashlight they send you, the ability to leave the egg holding tray in there, but have some kind of button or something where you can turn the rotating tray off rather than remove it, because the nice thing about that tray is it holds the eggs in place. When the first chicks start hatching and wandering around in there, they're not rolling the eggs all around. That would definitely have been a nice feature to have. And they could have done something better with the water container for the, to keep it humid in there. But at any rate, it still works. I, figured out ways to work around that. But anyway, so this time around, I picked 9 eggs because I didn't want to get too many more chickens at once, and chose only the eggs from my older buff Orpingtons. But sadly, 5 of those 9 eggs were not fertilized. And I know that, Antonio loves my buff Orpingtons, but what I think I figured out is they might have been the last eggs of the season from Kicking Bird, because shortly after that she started molting. So maybe she was already at that point where it's like, don't touch me, and that's why those eggs never got fertilized. The other 4 were from Claire, which has been one of my sweetest buff Orpingtons all along. So I was so glad that this time around I got some fertile eggs from her. And sadly though, one of the 4 it developed, but something happened right in the last stage and it just didn't make it, and that was a bummer. However, I still got 3. I have no idea if they're male or female. I still don't trust, even though I look, and it's like I look at those feathers, those wing feathers in the first couple of days, and I'm thinking they seem like they're female according to what I've read and watched. However, different breeds can affect how you can tell whether or not they're male or female, as in regards to the feathers, tail feathers, and all that. So it's not a real tried and true method unless you know how to vent sex them, and I don't feel comfortable with that yet because you have to be pretty careful. But what's really cool, so they're all from the same rooster, same hen, yet there are 3 different shades. So you have one that's definitely got the clear buff Orpington color, where the other 2, one's sort of a light bronzy color and the other one's kind of closer to brown. So they're really cool looking, and some people gave me some ideas. If they're hens, if all 3 of them just happen to be hens, I do have some names picked out that I'll reveal later once I find out. But I don't name them until I know for sure. So because if they're roosters, they're either going to have to find a new home, or they're going to have to be turned into dinner, because we're doing all this right now in a small area. I cannot have more than one rooster, plus we're in a neighborhood. And just to let everyone know, yes, I'm respectful of my neighbors. Yes, several years ago when we were first considering maybe getting a rooster, we did talk to our closest neighbors and nobody cared. And there are other places in our neighborhood that have roosters. So it's just the way it is. And it's just some people kind of jump to conclusions and make assumptions that I just don't care about my neighbors. Well, I never intended to have more than one rooster, but when I had actually 3 young roosters, one never started crowing while it was here, but that one we did find a home for. But the other 2 we did have to take out, sadly. It's just the way it is. Those cockerels, they eat a lot of feed. They were starting to get pretty aggressive with the hens of approximately the same age, and it was just getting too noisy out there, so it just had to happen. So anyway, I'm really excited about these chicks. They're so cute. I love them so much. I do just hope and pray that they are all hens, because I really don't want to have to take out any more roosters. But young chickens, when you take them out young, they are definitely a lot more tender than if you wait till they're older. So that's the update on that. But if you want, for more about our experience, just watch for that video coming out. I hope it does help people who are kind of looking at going this route, because first we just had hens for the longest time, adding a few here, adding a couple there. Then finally we ended up with a rooster, and now we're doing that too. And then the other thing I want to talk about is, you would have seen this past week, I had a short come out on our back deck garden. And yes, it's still rainy. I'm not sure, you might even be able to hear a little bit of rain here and there. But it's just the way it is when you live in rain country. We got a national rainforest just right down the road from us. So yeah, 120 inches average rainfall every year. And that's a low average. I keep saying, when I first moved to this area 30 something years ago, I already forgot how long ago it was, the average rainfall then was 144. So it's actually not as wet as it once was. 144, that's a gross of inches of rain every year. So anyway, the deck garden, let me go ahead and put this short here so you can see if you missed it the other day. But it was a rainy day. I wanted to just leave the sound in, not cover it up with music, because sometimes the sound of rain can be really soothing. So I just did a quick pan going from the back door side over to the far edge of the deck. So what you're seeing mostly are my grapevines, and there's a few strawberry plants and herb plants in pots, but the grapevines are not in pots. Neither are the blackberries you see coming through the grapevines on the one side, because those are all actually in the ground on the other side of the deck. The grapevines are just, I actually have to keep them pruned back to keep them from totally overtaking the deck these days. So throughout the whole season when they're growing like crazy, in fact, I got to go do it again because they're already coming out and starting to, reach out and grab everything. Now I do have some blueberries in pots. They're old. They haven't been doing so well. Even though they flourished in those pots for about 8 years, the last few years they just have not been doing great. But I do have a video coming out on that in my experience. And I do have one newer blueberry in a pot that eventually I'll probably put in the ground. And the other ones, the old ones, I'm going to just kind of hang in there. I prune them way back, and I just kind of want to see what they're going to do this next year. One of them does finally have some new growth coming up from the base, which is what you want to see. And I haven't seen that in my blueberries in a long time. And I lost a couple, completely died out. And when I took the third one out, actually 3 of them have completely died out of my 6 that I originally had. And when I managed to pull one out of the pot, I figured it wouldn't come out because it'd be so root bound. Come to find out, the roots had rotted from the outside in, so all I had was a tap root, and that would explain why parts were dying and they weren't getting any new growth. You can do good with blueberries in pots for several years, but they really are going to do best in the ground. So now that we have more places that we can plant such things, I'll be doing that. I just have to decide where exactly I want to plant my blueberries. I still would like to keep them here on this property, because out at our piece just down the road, we get a lot of elk out there and they will just munch those things clear to the ground. So here I can have a better control over them. And then obviously our mountain piece, that is a ways out of town. I'm not ready to be planting it much out there because I can't maintain it. I can't harvest anything off of it because I don't have time to be driving out there because it is a ways out of town. So for now, I think what I'll do is probably plant them directly in the ground in the back main garden. Obviously, I might have to take out some of my marshmallow plants, which I have far too many anyway, and plant them along there. So anyway, that's the deck garden. Again, this year we're giving our garden areas a sabbatical rest, but we still have a lot of perennials all over the place that are just going to do their thing anyway. But the chickens have been getting quite spoiled from all the currants I've been giving them from the plants in the backyard. Very, very spoiled, but it's a really good way to win those chickens over. One of my Buff Orpingtons that I bought, the new ones that I got from the nursery here in town. I bought 3 new Buff Orpingtons to add to my flock because I did still want some pure Buff Orpingtons. One of them is so sweet now, and it was all because I kept hand feeding them these berries, and now when I reach my arms out and call to her, she'll run right into my hands and pick her up and she'll cuddle into my neck. Even Claire, my sweetest Buff Orpington I've had, wasn't quite that sweet, wasn't that cuddly. So, and that, by the way, that hen, I named her Beatrix. But anyway, so another thing I wanted to share was that Peggy, one of my followers, sent me this great gardening book. It's vintage. It's from 1974, not antique. Antique has to be at least 100 years old, but it is definitely vintage. And very cool. I like adding vintage and antique books to my collection. Those are my favorite ones for several reasons. And so I really appreciate that gift. And then I want to come back to the dehydrated potatoes. I'm actually going to be shooting a separate video today going more in detail about the potatoes I've dehydrated and how I've dehydrated and how I've used them so far, and sharing a few things from people who've shared with me how they dry or use their potatoes. That I may try this next year when I put in a bunch of potatoes, because I plan on getting a lot of potatoes again like I did last year. So the other thing that I didn't think to mention last week is another way this is one of the first things I started doing for dehydrating potatoes, was making the mashed potatoes first, just making them plain, not adding milk, butter, and all that. And then dehydrating them in my trays and then powdering them up. So I have almost instant mashed potatoes. Not quite instant. They take a little longer to cook up, but it's still a faster, if you want some mashed potatoes, it's still faster than having to peel them and cut them and cook them and then mash them. So you just add your water and you cook them for a little bit. Like I said, they have to cook a little bit longer in the liquid. But I did make some coal cannon. I might have even done a video on that, on using all dried ingredients to make the coal cannon. I don't recall. Maybe it was just on using the dried potatoes, but I've actually made coal cannon using all dehydrated ingredients. So stuff I dehydrated myself. So dehydrated potatoes, dehydrated cabbage, and then dehydrated meat. So it was either the dehydrated corned beef, the dehydrated ground beef, or it was dehydrated roast beef. I don't remember which I used, but any of them would be good in there. So I love this because I just throw the ingredients in a pot, add some water or some broth even, and then because I also have dehydrated bone broth. I did do that with one batch, use dehydrated bone broth, and then just added water, and then whatever seasonings you want to add, and then just cook it. And if you need to keep adding water or even milk, you can keep doing that until you get it to the right consistency, and it's great. Which makes the whipping up the coal cannon so much faster than if you have to start with your fresh vegetables and peel them and cut them and cook them and so on. So yeah, I love this. I love being able to do this. So I'm definitely going to be putting up more dehydrated mashed potatoes as well next year. So I have a video just on that. I also have a video on dehydrating the potatoes, the slices, and the chunks. And since that video is going to be a while out, one thing I will say is on the chunks, I might go ahead and dice them up again, but I'm going to make them half as small so that they dry better. And then I know this is one of the tricky parts, is I did have a couple of jars that ended up moldy And I think it's because there might have been some pieces in there that weren't as dry as I thought they were, or they weren't as cooled down as I thought they were when I put them in the jar. Because that's one of the keys, is you want to make sure whatever you're dehydrating, before you vacuum seal into jars, you want to make sure they are completely cooled down to room temperature and there's no heat in them, or they can cause the inside of the jar to sweat, thus creating mold in there. So, but no problems with my sliced ones. So I'm pretty happy with those. And then something I forgot to mention about the other property that you might have seen the video that came out. It's going to be the first in a series of Patrick working out. We've actually had that piece of property outside of town for a couple of years, but it's only been this year that just recently that Patrick's been able to finally start making some time to get up there maybe once a week and start doing some work and clearing an area. But if you haven't seen that video yet, I'll link to it down below. There'll be more in this series. But yeah, it's just been crazy. It's going to probably take a very long time to be able to get that to where we can actually put our structure on there. But at least he's finally able to make some ground. It's been very busy, very kind of rather difficult year with some, with losing his father and more. But anyway, yeah, you might want to check that out. But like I said, there's going to be more to come. And now there's a few other things I wanted to mention, and that is last week's video, I said something about the dry canning potatoes, and I mentioned canning Nazis, and somebody got a little offended about that. And I want to explain this, and I understand. Maybe I should be a little bit more clear that when I use that phrase, I am not talking about people that simply just want to go by the book. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I have nothing against that. When I use that phrase, I'm talking about those people that want to come in and scream at you and browbeat you and tell you how terrible you are. Those are the people I'm talking about. So just understand, it's just that some people, there are tried and true methods that might not be quote unquote scientific, but people have been doing for 50 years or more. And in fact, I've been learning that there's a lot of Amish people that have been dry canning potatoes, carrots, and all kinds of stuff for a very, very long time. And to me, experience is just as important, if not more so, as science. And especially when a lot of times there's money that goes behind these so-called scientific methods, because it's a lot of times it's to sell a product, maybe it's to scare people away from their own home food preservation because they're afraid if they don't do everything exactly right, they're going to kill their whole family. Not all of it is. I'm just saying sometimes you see a little bit of that in there, that it just seems like there's a lot of fear mongering on all kinds of food preservation methods that it really shouldn't be, especially like things like dehydrating, one of the oldest forms of putting up food to get people through the winter. And people did it without freeze dryers, without electric dehydrators. They just used the power of the sun and the air. And that's all they used. And they dehydrated their meats and much more and kept them good throughout the whole year. So it's just not something I think we have to be so afraid of. Yes, look into it, do your own research and figure out what's best for you, but don't be afraid of it. But again, please don't take something like that so personally, because it's not meant the way you might be taking it. So, and I think most of you who've been following me for any length of time should know me better than that my intent is not to be like that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was the collaborations. I'm not going to go into all the details. I have 2 collaborations that are constantly ongoing, and then another one that we're working on that's just going to be its own standalone video. If you want more details about that, I'm just going to link it back to last week's this and that, because right at the beginning of that video, I go over the details on that. So mostly what I'm trying to do is everybody who already knows about them, just remember natural healing testimonies is one, preparedness testimonies is another, and the food storage photo collaboration is the other. Any thoughts, ideas you'd like to share, remember those comments do help us out. Just go ahead and put those down below, and thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.